Okay, so it's lesson 10. We're only going to have a 1 hour video today. So our last hour, we were kind of just chatting about Angular. We watched a bit of video. And our first hour, we were preparing for our group presentations and doing our quiz. So if you're not here and watching the video for the first time, yes, you missed a quiz. No, you don't get a makeup. And yes, you better check your email to find out about signing up for the group presentation. Okay, so what we want to do, let's go into our node folder on your computer. Let's make a lesson 10 folder. You don't need to copy the previous application. We're not working with Node today, just HTML and Angular. So just make an empty lesson 10 folder. And then open that folder up in your code editor, please. And we'll create a few HTML files and then we'll link them in with Angular. So just a blank lesson 10 directory. So let's create a new HTML page. You can call it anything you like, it doesn't really matter. I'll call it hello user.html. We're going to build out that sample I showed you earlier. We type in a text box, and as we change the text in the text box, we have a label that updates automatically. We can add Bootstrap to this. Now we have a couple options. In the other sections, I've gone and just grabbed the CDN links from Bootstrap and copied and pasted them in. We could do that, or we could grab Bootstrap out of our public folder from lesson 9, copy that into lesson 10. Maybe we'll do that. So let's go, just go to your lesson 9 folder and go to public. We don't need images. Let's just copy JavaScripts and style sheets, because JavaScripts has jQuery already. Style Sheets has Bootstrap already. So we'll just maybe copy those two directories. Go into lesson 9 or any of the other lessons from the course, doesn't really matter. I'll just grab JavaScripts and Style Sheets from lesson 9. I'll copy them and I'll go up to lesson 10 and just paste them in. As I said, I didn't do this in the other sections. We used the CDN. This is maybe a little faster. So now in lesson 10, I have both JavaScripts and Style Sheets. So let's add in to the header. So in my head, 2 CSS links, rel equals style sheet, and href equals style sheet slash. We'll add bootstrap.min.css. And we'll also add the bootstrap-theme.min.css. So those two. So now our page uses Bootstrap. Down at the bottom, we want to link to jQuery, which we've copied in our JavaScripts. We don't need to validate and we don't need the scripts. So just a simple script tag, source equals JavaScripts. So we just added jQuery to the bottom and Bootstrap to the top. I could launch this page in my browser now. It'll be blank, but it should have these three items linked successfully. Even though we're using HTML here, actually, if I click View, if I'm in WebStorm and just choose Open in Browser and choose Chrome, here's my page. Right? If I want to verify all these links work, I could view the source and just click each one. Okay, Bootstrap's good. Theme, good. jQuery, good. Okay, so my links are working. I've just verified them all by viewing my page source and clicking on each, my 2 CSS links and my 1 JavaScript link. So we're going to make this a really simple page. We're going to put on 2 labels and a text box. And then we're going to use Angular to connect up the text box and our second label. I'll just put on a div here. The one benefit, which I didn't think about in the other classes, when we use the CDN, our code editor doesn't recognize the classes in the CSS file. So you don't get the code prompts. When we have the CSS locally in the folder, when I type class equals, it goes to Bootstrap and it can read the classes. So we'll put on a label. There's some text. It's a class of control-label like we've been doing. And we'll just add a regular HTML input box. Give it a name of some text and an ID of also some text. And then down below this div, we're going to put one other label on. We'll give this one a class of alert info. It'll give it that light blue background. And actually, I'm just going to put a class on the body of container, which will give us a little padding, so it won't be pushed right up against the left margin. Maybe I'll put on a heading. Oh, this is just strictly HTML and CSS. We haven't done any JavaScript, any Angular code at all yet. So just a div with a label and a text box and then a display label down below. If I reload my browser, refresh, it looks like this. Okay, type, nothing happens. So we want to add some Angular directives here. This page, we won't actually have to write any JavaScript at all. We're just going to add some Angular directives to the page. So the first thing we need to do is we need to declare somewhere on here an Angular application, meaning this part of our HTML is accessible to AngularJS. Now, if we want everything in the document to be accessible to Angular, so we could put Angular values anywhere, what tag should we attach that Angular directive to? Yep, and where should we attach it to? Which HTML tag? We want to declare an ng app. You're right, Jonavi. Where should we put it if we want everything on the page to be accessible to our Angular ng app? We could put it on the body. Prashant? Let's put it right here. And we'll look at why. We'll move it around in a bit and we'll see how it behaves differently if we put it in different places. So in our HTML tag, let's attach, we don't even have to give it a name here, because it applies to the whole document. So that means every element in the document object model underneath, including the HTML, and underneath it is accessible by Angular. Everything inside here, Angular can access. So what we want to do is we want to set our text box up so that the value of that is always stored and monitored currently by Angular. So in effect, it becomes our model. If we go back to this diagram, right? So our model is reflected in the DOM, the document object model in our HTML. So what Angular directive would we add in here? Also would start with ng. In the video, Wolfgang, take a guess. It is ng model. So so in effect, we're creating almost like an Angular variable. It's an input from our HTML, so we'll give it a name of some text. So whatever is the current value of the text box, Angular will store with the name some text. So we want this value to always be updated in our document object model on this blue label. So whatever's in the text box, as we type here, this label should be reflecting that value. So what would we put into our label so that this alert always shows the current value of our ng model? What would go here? Yeah, okay, so how do we refer to that value in Angular? And what goes in here, Harsh? Right. So these will always display the same value at the exact same time. As this value changes, this value will change. So this is, in EJS, we'd have the angled brackets and the percent sign and the equals for output. This is the Angular version. And this syntax is often referred to as handlebar or mustache syntax, right? Handlebars, like you grab on, or mustache, it's like two vertical mustaches around it. And as they mentioned in the video, there are actually some other JavaScript templating engines called handlebars or mustache. So Angular's use that same syntax. Okay. I guess Megan's getting her choice. You can see she's editing the file. So now let's refresh the page. Okay. Clearly there's a problem here because Angular doesn't know what's going on here. I'll give you a hint. There's nothing wrong with our code. We're just missing a step. What are we missing? We did not install it. Yeah, we never, Angular isn't included. So we just need to download the Angular JavaScript file into JavaScript and link it in the footer. Again, in the other sections, we just use the CDN, the Content Delivery Network, to link to Angular. Angular's host, the CDN is by Google. So we can do that, or we can just go and download it. So let's just go to angularjs.org. We want Angular 1. So right in the front here, it says download Angular 1. Cool, that's what we'll do. So click on download. And if we click download here, it's going to download angular.min.js. So we'll download that to our JavaScripts folder. So click on download and let's put it in Node, Lesson 10, and JavaScript. So again, just go to AngularJS, click on download Angular 1, click the big blue download button and save it in your JavaScripts folder. Okay, so now it shows up here under Lesson 10 JavaScripts. Angular, there's the minified version, compressed. Where should we put it here? It does matter where it goes. Genevieve, what do you think? Okay, you think we should put it here? Okay, well, let's try it and see. So we'll add a script tag. See what happens. Is it me or did the air conditioning just come on? So let's refresh. Cool. So what does that tell us about the relationship between Angular and jQuery, which I think I told the other sections incorrectly? You guys always get the better lesson. So what's the dependency between these two? What if we switch them? Do you think it will still work? If we put jQuery second, still gonna work? Okay, so it still seems to work either way. I am surprised about that. Guess I need to be better prepared. So what does that tell us about the relationship between jQuery and Angular? Is there any dependency between the two of them? No, right? Because both our Angular code fires whether it's before or after jQuery, which means Angular doesn't depend on jQuery. So if you're watching the video and in the Wednesday or Thursday class, I was wrong. Won't be the first time, wasn't the first time, won't be the last time. Now notice these values have to match exactly, right? When we're outputting some text, we do this. Well, is it case sensitive? Yes, it is, right? Now we're trying to output a variable all in lowercase, but our ng model is declared in camel case. So that value doesn't show up anymore. If we look in the console, I'm not sure if we're going to get an error. We might. No error, just no value showing up. Now we haven't actually written any Angular code. All we've done is add a few directives into our HTML.
If we were to use the npm install for Angular,
Yep.
would you just reference, would it just be you just reference the JavaScript, but it would be in the node module folder?
Yes, it would be wherever it puts it. I'm not sure if we do npm yeah, it would probably be inside of node. It would generate node modules. So you can install Angular with npm. You don't have to download. You don't have to download it separately. It also has a Bower install, as I think it included here. So instead of using npm, you can use Bower, which some of you are going to teach the class what that's all about in a few weeks. Okay. So we can see how it does the two-way data binding. Always checking any values that we've given an ng model attribute. Angular automatically is always checking and making sure that the DOM is up to date with the current values of every ng model directive we add. So we haven't written any JavaScript. We're just using Angular to extend the functionality of our HTML page. Any questions so far? Make sense what we're doing? We have time. We have 20 minutes, which is enough time. I want to build a calculator page. So this one, we need an HTML page with some Angular directives. It's going to be a little different. We're also going to need our own JavaScript file that actually runs the Angular code. So what we can do to save a bit of time, let's copy all the HTML here. Just hit Control A and then Control C. Copy it all. We'll paste it into a new file and then we'll make some changes. Oh, sorry. One thing I want to do first, I want to show you. Let's say, sorry, there is one thing I want to do first. Let's say we also want this text to appear as the user types in the browser tab up here. How would we do that? So if I type something here, not only does it show in my alert, it also shows here as I change the value. How would we do that if we look at our HTML? Yeah, so in the title, let's use our handlebar syntax and add it here as well. So we've added the same Angular value into our HTML title. That's neat. Now, here's kind of the importance of the ng app. We had talked about earlier, and John, you suggested, you're right, we could have put the ng app directive on the body tag. What happens if I do that? So I'm going to move the ng app down here. What result will this give us, and why?
We will not get text in the title.
Why won't we get text in the title? You're right.
Because it's only working on the body tag.
Right, because Angular isn't aware of anything above the body tag or outside. So notice now it says, it just treats that as literal text. If it's outside of an Angular app, the directive is ignored. Doesn't mean anything. Title doesn't change in this case. What about if I move the ng app to my head tag? Whoops. What if I do this? What's going to happen now as I type in the text box, and why? Right. If the ng app is attached to head, it's only accessible in this section. Now nothing works. Even though we have the title here, remember the value is coming from our ng model in the text box. That's the ng model. Well, the body doesn't use Angular. So none of it works at all. So we have to kind of keep that in mind, that ng app, it only affects elements in the document object model that are at or inside, nested within that element. All right, so now I'm going to copy everything. I'm going to make a new file, which I will call calculator. And this should be a new new HTML file called calculator. I'll get rid of everything there and I'll paste in what we've got. I'm going to change the title my H1 to say Angular calculator, and I'm going to take out my Angular variable here, and I'll just hard code in, On this label, I'm going to change this to be X. And we'll change it to say enter two numbers. And I'm going to change some text on my first input to X, X, and X. Okay, so the name, the ID, and the NG model will all be X. I'm going to take out on my alert, for the moment, I'm going to take out the display value. We'll put it in a bit. I want two other things in my input. I want a drop-down list with 4 options with the 4 mathematical operators, and then we want a Y input box. So let's add a select. Name equals op, short for operator. ID equals op. And what do we need if we want Angular to be able to access the value selected in the drop-down? You got it. We'll give it an NG model. Pop. Whoops, I self-closed the tag. I don't want to do that. I need a closing tag as well. And then we need 4 option tags. Plus, minus, multiply, divide. So I'll just copy those and change those last 2 operators. And then I'll add one more input box. Name is Y, ID is Y, and NG model. Y. So we have 3 NG model directives, 3 values that Angular is going to keep track of. We're going to do our NG app a little differently. I'm going to remove NG app from the HTML tag. And what I'm going to do is create 2 other divs. So this one is going to get our NG app. We're actually going to give this app a name because we need to refer to it in the JavaScript file we're going to write. So let's call this calculator app. I'm going to put everything we've done inside. So all of my HTML that we already had, I'll just indent. In fact, I'm going to indent it 2 spaces. And rather than a div, I should probably put this in as a section. Actually, I'll do it this way. I'll put in a main tag, which would make Scott happy, better HTML formatting. And then we'll put in a section. And in here, we're going to use another Angular directive. Now that we've linked in Angular, you can see our directives are coming up in my code prompts, which is great. We want to set the NG controller. So this is the MVC part. So within our app, we can have multiple controllers, just like in an Express app. We could have one controller for everything. It's not a great idea. Why don't we want one controller for our entire application if we're doing Node and Express? Why do we typically have multiple controllers? Wolfgar?
You don't run unnecessary code.
Yeah, so we don't have one massive controller.
Scope.
Yep. We can control the scope within the controller, and we can divide the code. So same with Angular. So let's call it calculator controller. Sure. It actually prompts us. And again, I'll move my end section tag down here. So we have main contains our Angular app, and we have a section for this controller. So in effect, if we wanted different controllers or different sections, we could just declare other sections with other controllers. Now we already have this front-end JavaScript file that we've written for some of our other lessons. So we can actually write the Angular code we need in there if we want, or we could put it in its own file. I think I'll create it in its own script file. So let's make in JavaScript, let's make a new JavaScript file called calculator.js. And this is going to contain our Angular code. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to reference the ng app and ng controller. Determine X and Y. Run the correct calculation. Return the result to the HTML view. So this is what we're going to do in here. So first we're going to reference what's the name of the Angular module or Angular application we're referencing, which is our calculator app. There's another required parameter here, which is an array of options. We're not providing any options in this case, so we just put in an empty array. So options could include dependencies, things like that. And now we're going to set the controller. This is our calculator controller. So that's our first parameter. What's the name of the controller we want to access? The second one is an anonymous callback. Now our Angular callbacks are kind of similar to our Express callbacks. What are the parameters for an Express callback? Request, response, and next. Angular uses something similar, but it's not exactly the same. Instead of using request and response, so really Express callbacks, it's a two-part, right? The request is what comes in, and the response is what goes back. It's one way, in, two streams in and out. Remember, Angular is continuously two-way. So instead of having two separate parameters, one for the incoming request and a separate one for the outgoing response, Angular combines those into one parameter that it calls scope. So scope is managed here. And that's actually an Angular keyword, scope. So it's referenced this way as $scope. So we can access both the incoming values and the return values through the scope parameter. I'll just close my curly brace and close my controller here. So we want to set the result after running the calculation. So in Express, right, we would set a variable and then we'd pass that variable to the view. In Angular, the way we do this is we set scope dot, and we can just create an output variable, result. Then we'll display that variable in our HTML. So we're going to set it equal to a callback, into an anonymous function. And now we're going to write a case statement that will determine what kind of operator are we doing, add, subtract, multiply, or divide. This part's just basic JavaScript. This is simple now. We've basically written all the Angular code. So we need a switch, right? What value are we checking for as our condition? Yeah, we want to check the value of op. So this is an incoming value, so it belongs to the scope object, right? In Express, it would be like request.body.scope. Sorry, request.body.op. In Angular, it's just $scope.op. And then we'll open another set of curly braces. And down at the end, we need a semicolon when this is all done, right? That closes our function when we're setting it equal to our scope variable. So we need that semicolon down at the end. Now we just need a case statement. When the user picked a plus sign, we return, how do we add the two text box values together? Not just X, yeah, you're right, we have to add something with it. X and Y belong to, they belong to the scope. So we take, and in fact, we should parse those as integers, otherwise they'll get concatenated. So we'll call parse int scope.x plus parse int and then we call break. And whoops, I missed curly braces here as well.
You need to put a break in on your return?
I think you actually do. It just never finishes execution. It returns the value, but it may hang. We'll try it, and then I'll take it out and we'll see. At least it does in Node and Express. In Angular, to be honest with you, Skylar, I'm not sure. The others, well, parse int is not a bad idea anyway. So if we get a minus sign, let's subtract. We'll just run those 4 operations. So the case statement really isn't new to anybody, I'm sure. The new part is accessing the model, the controller, and the scope object. I'll also write out a default. When the page first loads, or if we get something else, we'll just return we'll just print a message on our alert. So there's our function that gives us a value called return. Sorry, result. We're setting a variable, a scope variable with the name of result. We're going to want to display that value with our mustache syntax in our alert label, where before we were displaying some text, we want to display this result value. We also need to link this script file. This is not attached to our page yet. So right now, nothing will run. So at the bottom, after Angular, we're going to add our calculator custom script. So this has to go after our link to Angular. Our script source is JavaScript calculator. So add that link to the bottom. And now in our alert, you can display our result variable. Because result calls a function, we actually need the two brackets. It's not just the variable because we're assigning result equal to our anonymous function, much like we've done in Node and Express. So we need to call result bracket bracket. I think this is everything. We're just about out of time. I want to just check it quickly. I will put it up on Git as well. Just going to see if there's any changes we need to make. So if I view this in Chrome, that's good. So my label gives the instructions. As I enter a number, it gives me not a number. So we could be checking for this in our function as well with an if statement. And now when I enter something, it starts running the calculation. If I change my operator, it subtracts. If I multiply or divide. How do we know it's accurate? Well, we could try numbers that. So Angular is always, it runs this function anytime any one of those values change, Angular automatically recalculates. Kind of like our Amazon shopping cart, right? As soon as we change something in the cart, our totals are recalculating automatically. Here's the script again for a minute if you need to see it.
Do you know why we might be doing, showing in the result box, the mustache result function?
Did you include the brackets?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. So you have to make sure that name matches exactly. It's $scope.result. Skylar, have you tried it without breaks? Does it work?
I haven't tried it yet.
Work without the break? Okay, good. Why write code? Why write any more code than we need to? So if it works without the breaks, switch commands. If it runs without those. And we could easily add at the top here, at the start of our function, it would be easy to check. We could parse int, we could check that both X and Y were numeric. So we could say, if not, is NaN X, or is not NaN Y. So if either one of those things were true, oh, I do need 3 brackets here. One, two. I got my brackets right there. I think that's right. So if either one of these is not a number, we just want our label to display the message. But now we don't get the NaN as we're entering the first number and moving on to the second number. Oh, that broke something. I'll have to fix that. I've killed my function. I'll fix that before I upload to GitHub. To rethink my logic here a bit. Okay, I guess we should get out of here. There is another class coming in.
It might be because you have to work. So, oh no, never mind. Never mind.
Yeah, but once I have them both, it should run.
I was thinking that if one is blank and the other is not, then it would still go through and be like a break because it's not.
Yeah, I've got to think about, quickly I would think that should work. But obviously there's a quick, something I'll have to change.